What's up, everyone? So it's time for me to finally make a video about my Harbor Freight towable backhoe. I've had this thing for a month, maybe 2 months. Been using it quite a bit around here. It's extremely useful. Don't regret the purchase at all. But I've had a couple questions about it. Surprisingly, these things really aren't that common. I'm really surprised that more people don't buy these and that it's not a more well-known thing. I think a lot of people probably think the same thing that I did whenever I first started looking at it, and that was that it's probably just junk. Because you see something made by Harbor Freight at the price point that it is, it's like $29.99. It's like basically $3,000, and there's not hardly anything comparable to that. The closest comp in something like this is probably like those Chinese mini excavators. And there's a couple of other towable backhoes, but you just don't see anything about them. There's a lot of videos about these out there, but not like a ton. So I kind of wanted to contribute to that because I had a few questions that I couldn't really get answered by the YouTube videos that I looked up. And I wanted to try to cover everything that I could about this thing for anyone that's curious about it. If you're thinking about getting one, it's probably worth it for if you got pretty much any type of digging projects. Way better than using a shovel. But definitely no comparison to having like an actual backhoe or a mini excavator. So I currently have it in its towable configuration. It's not highway legal. It's got a big sticker on the side of the hydraulic tank on the other side that says not for highway use. That said, I have towed this on the highway. When I ordered this, I had it shipped to our shop, which is like a 30-minute drive from here, because I knew I didn't want to put it together out here. I knew if I had it delivered there, I'd have help putting it together, and I would have all the tools and machines that we have in the shop to put it together. So I figured what my original plan was to put it together there and then put it on a trailer, assembled, and then trailer it out here. What ended up happening is I just hooked up my truck and I towed it out here. By the time we had it put together, it was pretty late. It was like 7 or 8 in the afternoon, and there was pretty much no traffic. And I came up with a route where I didn't really have to get on hardly any highways, only a few, and I could keep it below 50 miles an hour. And once I was looking at the assembly of this thing, I felt pretty good about towing it on the road, and it did just fine towing here. I'm not recommending that you do it. There's no tail lights. There's no lights on it at all, and no suspension, and it's really top heavy. That I noticed, like, all of the weight pretty much is up here when it's hooked to the truck. So I started thinking, if you go around a corner really fast, you could definitely roll it, and I didn't want to risk that. And then with the no suspension, it bounces, and then the weight's up there. So I took it very slow over every bump I went over and around every corner, and it was totally fine, no problems at all. I put red flags all over the place, since there's no tail lights on it, and this sticks out so far from where the axle is. I had flags and caution tape all around everything. But it does lock into position here. There's a big lock right here that locks the boom from swinging or going up and down, and then there's a pin here you drop through that keeps it from moving like this, and then there's a pin that goes through right here that locks this in position. So before you tow it anywhere, everything does lock in. So it's not just hydraulic pressure holding the boom all together. And that gives you a little bit of reassurance, but it doesn't lock in the most compact position. I'm pretty sure where the boom locks is actually down a little bit from being all the way up and all the way in, but it's definitely not a big deal. So it's actually, in this configuration, it's really not too hard to move around by hand either. You can pick it up. It's got just a regular trailer coupler over here and safety chains, and you can very easily roll it around on paved surfaces. It's definitely not. I kind of had to struggle when I got it here, trying to roll it in on the gravel and up the hill. It gets hard fast because these wheels are so small. It can't hardly roll over any bumps. The seat just lifts off whenever you transport it. It just sits on this post. So you can see here on the other side, it just has a regular 1 7/8" coupler. If any of you guys have their utility trailer, the folding utility trailer, you'll recognize a lot of the hardware that they use on this trailer is very similar. This is pretty much the same coupler that's on that trailer, and it does have safety chains. They're not very impressive. These hooks are very dingy, but it does have those, but obviously no light hookup because there's no lights on it at all. So that's that's one of the biggest concerns about towing it on the highways. No lights, no suspension, and really top heavy, and it's also really narrow. It's a lot narrower than a regular trailer is. And another thing that I'll mention is these wheels and hubs are actually the same as what's on that utility trailer also. So I have their 4x8 folding utility trailer. That's what I did my camper convert, or my homemade camper out of. If you have seen any of my camper videos, that's what that's built out of. So the hubs came exactly the same way. You have to put the hubs together, or you have to pack the bearings with grease yourself and pack them in and put the castle nut on and all that. I went ahead and packed those bearings full of grease. They got a little bit of grease on them, but they're not actually packed in. I went ahead and packed both bearings full of grease just to be sure. But seeing that that's what the hubs were like, that gave me a little bit more confidence in towing it on the highway. As soon as I saw that it had the same hubs as my camper, because I've towed my camper on the highway hundreds of miles just fine, maybe thousands of miles at this point, just with no problems at all. That gave me confidence in these hubs to hold up to the weight or to the speed of highway speeds pulling it down the highway. I didn't get it above 50 miles an hour the whole way here, and for the most part, I was going 30 or 35 miles an hour the whole way here. I just took it nice and slow. I pulled over and let people pass me, just because getting it here on a trailer was just going to be too much of a hassle. I just did it that way, and the area that I live in, the police it's farm country. A lot of this area, so it's a lot of people moving farm equipment all the time. I figured they would understand and tell them it's going to be a one-time thing. I just got to get it out here, get it parked, never going to move it again. So as far as actually using it as a backhoe, it doesn't work in this configuration. It has two big outriggers, and I haven't figured out if there's a way to actually store those on here. And I haven't seen every video I've seen where anyone has come up with a way to store them. It kind of looks like a homemade option. So when I brought them out here, I just threw them in the bed of my truck with the seat. So you can't dig without those outriggers on here because it's too. There's no counterweight. So it needs that leverage of those outriggers, because you can imagine as soon as you start putting weight on this boom, it just picks the other side right up with barely any force. So you couldn't be in this position and pick any dirt up like this, because it would just be lifting the back of the machine up. So when you tow it to the area that you want to dig in, and then you take the axles off and you swap them for those outriggers, and then you move the axles to these in the back, and then that way you can pick it up and drag yourself around with the boom, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. But what I have seen at least one guy do, which I think was a pretty good idea, it would be a good idea if you had like a small tractor, or maybe, I don't know if a lawnmower or four-wheeler would be heavy enough, but I saw one guy, he brought two more of these axles and he stuck them in back here too, so it was four wheels, and then he would just leave it hooked up to his tow vehicle all the time. So if you had a heavy enough vehicle you were towing this with like a subcompact tractor or something, I believe that would work, where you could just dig and you could just use the tractor as your counterweight. It might put some stress on that coupler. I don't know if the coupler would hold up to that, because it would be trying to pick the back of the machine up the whole time as you were digging. But that would be a much more convenient way to move this thing around if you were moving across longer distances, because you could back it into position and just get right on it and dig, and then you could just move it like a trailer and not have to go through the whole swapping the axles and outriggers around process every time you want to move it a longer distance. I would probably consider doing something like that if I had a bigger lawn tractor than that one, but that thing is so light, I know for sure it would pick it up. Plus, the brakes don't work on that lawnmower. I'd definitely get myself into trouble trying to tow it with that thing with no brakes. But so I'll go ahead and take my mic off and show you guys the process of swapping this over to the outrigger, the digging mode, so everyone can see that. That's something I haven't really seen on YouTube. I'm sure that there's videos out there of it, but I couldn't come across it, and it's a little bit tricky to kind of figure out. This thing can feel kind of scary sometimes when you're using it, because it feels like it's going to flip over on you or slide away, or it gets unstable throughout the process. But I think I've come up with a pretty good way to swap back and forth from digging to towing mode, and I want to show you guys what that looks like. So actually, on second thought, I think I am going to leave my mic on, just so I can kind of explain this process as I work through it. Hopefully the sound from the engine doesn't make my voice sound all staticky and robot-y. That kind of happened when I was working with my truck the other day and I had it running. I had the mic on. It's the mic trying to tune out the sound of the engine makes the quality kind of drop down. I've got a new mic ordered. It's coming in tomorrow, so hopefully this will be one of my last videos with this cheap microphone. But so this has the Predator 301cc engine. As far as from what I've heard so far, it's a really, really good engine. Starts first pull every single time for me. I don't have it through the break-in period yet. I can't remember what the owner's manual says. It has a break-in period listed. Then you're supposed to do an oil change, and then you can actually rev the engine up. But so I'm leaving it idle basically all the way down all the time. So I still haven't really experienced this thing at its full power. It's still, at the end of the day, it's just running a hydraulic pump. So I don't think it's really going to make much difference whether it's idled up or idled down. But I've been keeping it down throughout this break-in period. But very happy with how easily this thing starts. I hardly ever even have to choke it to get it started. So there's a kill switch right here on the front. It's a big red knob that says on and off. That's how you turn it off once you have it running, and then you have to make sure and flip that on before you pull it. And that's how it starts every time. It's always just usually starts before you even go through the whole stroke of the pull. So the way I figured out to do this, that's kind of the safest, is to do one wheel at a time. So since I'm just sitting on the center of the tongue on the back, there's a little wheel on there. I guess that's just to make it kind of easier to move around. It makes it a very small balance point for it to sit on. But if you do it this way, this makes your, instead of picking both wheels up and then you're just sitting on just the boom and that, and you're just a 2-point thing that's rotating, you can do one wheel, take it off, set it all the way down, spin it around, take the other wheel off. That way you're always sitting on the boom, this wheel, and that one. And then once you take one wheel off, you're sitting on the boom and then this little spot that the axle slides into. So I'll go ahead and show you. I'm just going to come up just enough that I can get that wheel off the ground. And you can just pull the pin out. I'm going to go ahead and set it back here because that's just where it's going to be going. And then I'll just start slowly coming up. Nothing sudden. You can see I'm pretty lean now. And it gets, like I was talking about, it gets a little bit unstable throughout this process. I'm just going to, once again, just barely pick it up. Right there is enough. And then I just pick that boom back up so that my front end is back down flat on the ground. And then what I'm going to do is just go straight out in front of me and just start reaching it out. You see how the rear end starts to come up? I want that rear end to come up enough that I can get those axles in. So I figure that's high enough. Okay, so that adds a whole lot of stability having that extra width back there once those axles are on. So now you can just start to pick the boom back up again, bring it into about here, and see now I can just pick the front right up, and it's not all unstable like it was a second ago because now I'm sitting on those two wheels instead of that one little balance point right in the middle. I'm not teetering like I was before. So I picked that up plenty. And then here's my outrigger. These are really heavy, I'm not going to lie. They're not easy to throw around. Okay, so you can see these outriggers have, I don't really know if this is an intentional design for it to be used in two different ways, but what I've been doing is anytime I'm using it on the driveway, I put the outriggers like this, so it's this big flat area, so you get a little bit more surface area contact along the concrete. Since these spikes obviously aren't going to actually dig in and grip anything, these spikes are really good when you're in the dirt. Almost anytime you set it down in dirt that's soft, if it's not compacted ground like a driveway, the weight of the machine will push it down in until this is just flat against the ground. And then you got a really good hook that you're pulling against every time you dig, and it's actually keeping the machine stable. Even on concrete, even with it like this, it still usually kind of pulls it forward. You can see all these scratch marks are on my driveway where I've been digging. It's usually dragging forward. There's been a couple of times I've had to chalk the wheels to give myself a little bit of extra grip. I don't think this thing is really meant to be used on pavement, but I've got a couple spots where I need to. Okay, so I went ahead and put that boom all the way up like that just to show you guys just how high this thing can reach. I'm 6'2" and I'm wearing boots. I'm usually about 6'4" once I'm wearing these boots. So it's got a pretty high reach capacity. If that's useful to you, it doesn't really matter to me how high it can actually reach like that. It's got something like a 300 or 350 pound lift capacity, I think. I've picked up a couple of really big rocks with it. And there's a seller on Amazon. I don't know if Harbor Freight actually makes it, but there's apparently a bolt-on thumb you can put on this thing that obviously doesn't move, but it just sticks straight out. So then when you curl the bucket in, you can grip things. I'm planning on getting that eventually. I just haven't yet. But I definitely want to get that. Besides that, I think that for the most part is covering it. I think I'll just show you what it looks like moving it around with the boom, because it is very slow going, picking this thing up and just dragging itself around with this. So far, the only problems I've had with it is just a couple of small hydraulic leaks, and most of that's all been my fault. I just haven't been getting these fittings tight enough. And I guess while talking about that, that reminds me of the assembly. So the way that they ship this thing, it's pretty broken down, but not too bad. So none of the only about half the hydraulic fittings are hooked up. They hook them up to the control is like, it's kind of like 50-50. Like half of them are hooked up to the hydraulic rams and half of them are hooked up to the controls. So you have a couple of hoses you have to hook up. That's like the very last step. Besides that, putting it together, you have to didn't record the assembly at all. So I know you had to bolt. I had to bolt this control panel on. Most of these fittings were already hooked up, but there was just those 4 bolts right there that had to go on. I know we put most of the boom. I think the boom had to be completely put together. I think some of the rams were hooked up with pins. It all just goes together with just pins and cotter pins. So it probably takes a couple of people. I had 2 guys helping me, and we were picking it up and holding it and sliding stuff through. I think I could have done it by myself. It wouldn't have been easy. If you had like a cherry pick or engine hoist, that would help, or a forklift. Just something that you could put up right here and adjust the height on just to tie pieces to, tie the boom to. Because this and that bucket are all extremely heavy. They're hard to pick up, and you definitely couldn't hold it with one hand and work that pin through with the other, I don't think, unless you're just extremely strong. The engine was all mounted and on. I had to put oil in it, but that was it. I had to add hydraulic fluid. It took close to 5 gallons. It was almost a full bucket of hydraulic fluid. I just bought it at Tractor Supply, the tractor fluid. Put that in there. I didn't have to like purge the lines or anything. Once I put it in there, everything was good because it already has. They ship it. They test all these before they ship them. So there's hydraulic fluid in the lines already. It's just they just ship with the tank. The reservoir is dry when they ship it. And then I had to put the coupler on and put the safety chains in the coupler. That's just a couple of bolts. And putting the axles together, which fortunately I had done that before because I bought one of their trailers. So for the most part, the assembly is actually overall the assembly is really easy. It's just screwing hydraulic fittings together. You just need a good wrench for that, and putting pins through, and then bending those cotter pins afterwards. And then you just need a hand to help you assemble it. And the instructions they're not amazing, but they're not useless. Like it only took like an hour, maybe 2 hours for us to get it put together, and then I towed it out here. But I really need to. It's probably about time for me to do my first oil change, and I need to check the reservoir, see if that hydraulic fluid has gotten low at all. Because like I said, I've had a couple of hydraulic fluid leaks, not major ones. You might be able to see it's like slowly dripping right here. That's one of these connections right here at the bottom of this boom is dripping. But I need to check on that. It's most likely just a loose fitting. That's what all of them have been so far. There was so many that I was connecting. There's a lot of them that I hand tightened, and then I just never went back and actually snugged them down. So I'll show you guys what it looks like moving this thing around. It can be pretty inconvenient sometimes, I'm not going to lie. If I do end up having to do a lot of dirt work out here, I hope that eventually I can make the upgrade to either a used mini excavator, or what I really want is a subcompact tractor with a backhoe attachment on it. So some of the hydraulics are pretty slow. You can kind of see that bucket opening and closing is really slow. I know a lot of people upgrade the hydraulic pump on these things to make them faster. I don't think I'm going to. I want to keep it stock because I don't think I'm going to keep this thing forever. So when it comes time to sell it, I want it to just be all original. So when you're moving, just like that, you just pick it, reach that boom out as far as it can, straight, and then just go straight down until it picks the front up. And then you can just start to curl the boom in like this. And I usually kind of drop the front as I come in. That way I'm not just coming straight up. Just like this. And you can only move about that far at a time. And then you got to do all this again. So it works. It just takes a very long time if you're going very far. So it'd be the same thing. You just continue on. And then you can turn, you can change directions by moving the boom left and right. So if I need to go this way, I can pretty much max out, and then I can actually still back up a little bit, come up, and then if I wanted to go backwards, I can curl the boom in while it's like this. And it's, like I said, it's slow hydraulics. Move it over here, set down, rotate myself, and then I push myself backwards. So that's the basics of moving it. It's really not complex. There's only 4 controls. It's just left and right. This is up and down with the main boom. This is in and out with the elbow, and then this is curling the bucket. So very simple. One thing I will say, these really aren't that easy to move. It actually takes some force. So the first day I was using this, I was just doing it barehanded with no gloves on, and I wore my hands out. I had blisters all over my hands because you're actually having to push on these pretty hard. So I definitely recommend wearing gloves when you're using these controls because they're not very big around, and they're not very cushioned, and they actually do take quite a bit of force to move. So I'll go over my complaints. My main complaint is the maneuverability of it. It's just really slow, and that kind of goes into my next complaint, and that's just the hydraulics are so slow. If the hydraulics moved pretty fast, almost like a regular like excavator that you see, it wouldn't be too bad because you'd be able to really crawl yourself pretty quick if you were moving. But it's like every movement is just like snail's pace, and I know that a lot of people fix that by putting that faster hydraulic pump on there. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to put any money into this thing, and I also don't want to start altering it because I've heard about people tearing these things up because they make them too strong for the metal. I know a lot of people have broken the booms in half. A lot of people have broken the buckets in half. People have snapped these spots where the outriggers snap in off or slide in off. So it's still Harbor Freight, so it's still not a high quality steel that it's all built out of. But I mean, for what it costs, I think it's great. It 20. I got it on sale, 10% off. It was like $500 off. Memorial Day sale a few months ago. It came in less than a week. I think I was surprised how fast it came in because I've read apparently during 2020 during COVID when everyone was in quarantine and they were doing a lot of work around their houses. Apparently, a lot of people started ordering these things, and it became hard to get them and people were waiting like multiple months to get them to come in. I was afraid that was going to be me, but no, it came in like a week, and it wasn't a problem for me because I had it delivered to our shop where we have a loading dock. I know that's another issue. It's like an extra 200, I think, to pay for a truck with a lift gate for everyone that has these things delivered to their houses. Fortunately, I have access to our shop where we have a loading dock, so we just forklift or pallet jacked it right off the truck. Comes in a big wooden crate, and assembly wasn't hard at all. So I think that's about it for my complaints. Just how slow it is really the only problem I have. It's plenty strong. The back, it still is a little bit light. When you're trying to pick up something heavy or you hook into a big rock on the ground, it'll usually just pick the rear end up instead of picking it up. But I imagine that's a problem that I think you would have with any small mini excavator or backhoe, or like backhoe on a tractor or anything like that. That's just the nature of using small equipment. But it's stronger than I expected. I was thinking it was gonna have no digging power, but it digs holes just fine. It's just slow. So way, like I said, way better than using a shovel. It's actually got a really big bucket. It's like a 10-inch bucket, I think, that it has on there. You can get nice, good bucketfuls out of it when you're scooping. Reaches, I think, 7 feet down and goes up as high as you saw. So I haven't dug any big holes with it yet. I've just dug this trench over here, and then I dug into my hillside over there with it. But I'll make sure and add some footage of me digging with it. And then here's something I wanted to show. So I heard about people having this problem, and I'm not surprised that it's happening, but these holes where the pins go in, that's the pin that holds the outrigger in, you can kind of see it's getting oblonged, and that's from the force when you're digging. It's pulling the machine forward and back, it's bracing against these outriggers, and it's wallowing this hole out. You can see where it's rolling up. So that is the only problem that I'm really having so far, and it's not a big deal. I've seen quite a few people fix that by just welding a piece of plate steel on the top and bottom, just basically brace it across here, weld it down, drill it out, and then just get a longer pin, and then it gives it a little bit more surface area for that pin to be binding up against, so it doesn't start pushing into that steel so easily.